So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, September 18th, 2023 Development Activities Meeting for the Greater Hill District. Tonight, we will have the Hill District Consensus Group, the Hill Community Development Corporation, and the Hill District Collaborative representing tonight. We will have an overview of the development activities meetings. The Registered Community Organization Program is administered through the Department of City Planning, or DCP, to incorporate community input and development activities. Applicants requesting to go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission, the Historic Review Commission, and/or the Public Art and Civic Design Commission for a public hearing and whose projects meet certain thresholds must coordinate with the Registered Community Organization and Department of City Planning to hold a Development Activities Meeting, or a DAM, to engage the community. A DAM provides community stakeholders an opportunity to learn about proposals that may affect them and to share any concerns they may have before a project moves on to public hearing. Reporting to boards and commissions. The neighborhood planner takes notes on the meeting and completes a report, including a brief summary of the project as it is presented, the permission sought that prompted the need for the DAM, the questions asked by attendees, and the answers they received. This report is provided to the relevant board or commission prior to the hearing on the project so they can understand the nature of the meeting and the project that was discussed. The DAM report is neutral and makes no conclusions. If you have strong feelings about the project, you should still consider attending the board or commission meeting and testifying. Presenters. Please clearly describe the slide being presented in order to assist those participating via audio to follow along with the presentation. If the host needs to change your status in the meeting, there may be a pause or reconnection circle. Please do not restart Zoom, let it finish. After each presentation, please disregard this actually. Oh, sorry about that. After each presentation, we will invite questions and comments in this order. First, the chat and Q&A tools are enabled for you to type out questions. The moderator will read out these questions in the order they are received. Second, if you would like to speak your questions out loud, you may tap the raise hand button. The moderator will unmute attendees who have raised hands when ready. And third, for voice call-ins, press *9 to raise hand. The moderator will announce the last 4 digits of your phone number and unmute when ready. As you all know, this meeting is being recorded to allow any stakeholders who were not able to attend to watch the proceedings at a later time. And first up, we are going to allow each of the registered community organizations a chance to introduce themselves. So first up is the Hill District Consensus Group.
Who wants to handle that? Go ahead and do it.
You want me to do it?
That's fine. Go ahead, Vaughn.
Okay, so we're the Hill District Consensus Group, and we welcome you. We are a membership-based organization, started more than 30 years ago. Our goal is to build solidarity among Hill District residents and organizations, and to help to preserve the cultural legacy of the Hill District. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. You can go on. I think everybody here knows who we are, I believe. This is just telling you who some of our staff folks are. Can you go to the next slide? And basically our goal is to, the conclusions that we draw are primarily from community input from multiple residents, other stakeholders, to help us form our opinions about various projects. We use a rubric to score projects that are brought to us as part of our public meetings, unless projects are on kind of a smaller scale, and then we might make an internal decision ourselves. Next slide, please. We can go on next slide. This is more of our infrastructure. That's it. So in regard to this particular project of the curtain call, we have very long-standing dealings with the curtain call since its original conceptualization. Many of the pictures that were gathered as part of the curtain call are from the members of the Hills District Consensus Group, as well as other organizations. We helped to find the Rivers, which did the original green space study that led to the curtain call being pulled together as part of the Lower Hill development. And that in regard to the second project, we have not heard from that developer. That is it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dylan Brown. I'm a Community Development Fellow at the Hill District Community Development Corporation, and I will be representing Hill CDC at tonight's development activities meeting regarding the curtain call project. Next slide, please. So the Hill CDC, oh, I can hear myself reverberate. We've been celebrating 35 years of operation. We're a place-based organization focusing on the redevelopment and revitalization of the Greater Hill District. Our motto is where cultural legacy meets future innovation. And on the next slide, we talk a little bit about the focus of our organization. Our mission is to work with residents and stakeholders to promote and implement strategies that connect plans, policies, and people to drive compelling community development opportunities in the Hill District. Next slide, please. So our focus areas, like in our mission statement, are people, place, and policy. On the next slide, we go into a little bit of detail about different programs that we run at Hill CDC, whether that's focusing on place, like our real estate development team, people, and policy. We do a lot of different things at Hill CDC, and we're fundamentally committed to bettering the residents of our community every day, whether that be through economic development or larger ideas like policy and planning. So next slide, please. So the Development Review Panel is the Hill District's unified community review process. It's a two-step process that I'll go over very briefly. These are the member organizations of the Development Review Panel. On the next slide, we go over the process, I believe. No, this is just a background of the DRP. It was founded nearly a decade ago and was designed and adopted by the Hill CDC after negotiations with various community partners, stakeholders, and elected officials. On the next slide, it should be the process of how the DRP works. So we've scored over 50 projects, and it is an 8-member organization with 11 people appointed to the body. And as it's been strengthened and proven, multiple organizations were added to the steering and appointing members for collaboration on our panel of committee members. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about different projects that have been before the DRP. It's an ongoing process. We reviewed, like I said on the previous slide, we reviewed over 50 projects and seen them go through the whole process. So it's a very well-established process for community development review and input. On the next slide, it talks about how it is a two-step process, where the first step is a deep dive with the members of our committee, where the developers present to our panel of committee members, and the committee members score this plan on its alignment with the Greater Hill District Master Plan. And with projects that happen in the Lower Hill site, there is also an additional scoring according to the CCIP, the Community Collaboration and Implementation Plan. And so if the score is determined to be in alignment, the second step is to advance the plan for community review and vote. where every single resident of the Greater Hill District is invited to participate, hear the plan, and vote themselves if they want to support this project or not. Next slide, please. And so as an RCO, we only draft letters of support for projects that have completed the entire DRP process, and that requires a cumulative score of 80% or higher. That being said, if their score is less than 80%, the Hill CDC always tries to work with developers to revise their plan and allow the team to represent an updated version to the committee or to the wider community if necessary. And if this process, and if this process does not continue, we issue a letter of non-support if the development team chooses to disengage or back away from their commitments to the DRP. Next slide, please. So with regards to tonight's applicant, the Penns and Parr regarding their curtain call project at Wiley and Crawford, as a result of the Lower Hill Block E negotiations, which Hill CDC led, the Penns agreed to meet with the Hill District community about their proposed move of the site from in front of PPG Arena to Block A2, which we are considering today. So the Hill CDC convened this meeting along with the Shenley Heights Collaborative and the Hill District Consensus Group at St. Benedict the Moor on August 23rd, 2023. These member organizations, including Hill CDC's, Shenley Heights, and the Consensus Group, were in the process of providing written feedback to the Penns in a formal memo format, and we'll be making sure to share that memo with the City Planning Commission, elected officials, the URA, the SEA, media sources, and the broader Hill District community. Next slide, please. These were nope, I was getting ahead of myself. So also, oh no, you're good. You can go to the next slide. I just thought it was going to be a different one. So the Penns also attended a bi-monthly plans meeting that the Hill CDC convenes regularly along with our Hill District planning partners. This was mainly due to technical difficulties that we ran into at St. Benedict the Moor. And I encourage anyone watching this video to watch a recap of that presentation on the Hill CDC's YouTube channel at My Hill District. And additionally, we're happy to announce that the developer has submitted to the Hill District's Unified Voice on Community Development Review, the DRP, which I will discuss shortly. On the next slide, you'll see just a quick screenshot of this bi-monthly plans meeting. You can see Craig in the top corner. This on the left was the flyer that we shared with the community in advance of our meeting. And on this flyer, you can see the two different sites that were being considered for the curtain call project. On the next slide, we talk a little bit more about the DRP's engagement. Actually, before that, outstanding issues that were remaining unresolved from this community meeting that we are putting into this memo format include the construction schedule for this development, the timeline, site ownership, and specifically the community's representation on the association's board, the status of funding from the Penguins and other development partners. A lot of residents that attended the meeting discussed the need for a historical and contextual narrative of the site and the pictures that were chosen. Another issue was the responsibility of maintenance and security and whether or not the community was supportive of this. There was discussion regarding a survey being sent out to the community and if it was possible for the development to achieve universal accessibility at its original site. These are the things from the St. Benedict the Moor meeting that we had that we will be summarizing in a memo for the Penguins, like I said. On the next slide, I talk about the DRP. So the Penguins presented to the DRP on September 6th, but unfortunately their formal presentation failed to receive a passing score. So they have not completed the process. Like I said earlier, the lack of a passing score does not mean that their engagement is over, but rather it continues. So the developer has been invited to consult with Hill CDC staff and the DRP committee to hopefully present an updated plan to the committee at our next meeting on October 4th. And as I said earlier, as an RCO, we only endorse projects that have completed the DRP process, and applications for anyone watching can be submitted at hilldistrict.org/DRP. Next slide. So a response letter concerning the initial committee score that I mentioned was delivered to the Penguins with recommendations to better align this project with the Greater Hill District Master Plan and the CSIP plan for the Lower Hill. We will share any additional feedback or updates with City Planning Commission, elected officials, the URA, the SEA, the media, and the broader Hill District community should the developer continue engagement with the DRP, which we highly encourage them to do. And on the last slide, you can see social media for Hill CDC, which you can join our weekend roundup, which has over 2,500 residents and stakeholders. Those go out every Saturday and Sunday. They talk a lot about different policy plans and projects that are going on in the Hill District. You can always follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or on LinkedIn, where we're very active and we love to engage with the community. Thank you all so much for your time, and thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have the Hill District Collaborative.
Yes, so yes, this is the Hill District Collaborative. Next slide. So we are an RCO that formed in March 9th of 2022. So we are relatively young. Next slide. Please. So the Hill District Collaborative basically formed because our members felt that there was a need for more community voice in regard to development projects. We felt that the current process that was articulated as a unified voice was not inclusive enough. And so we formed the Hill District Collaborative. Next.
That's actually the last slide, Bonnie.
Okay, so in regard to the curtain call, I put in the comments, I apologize, I just came from a day full of meetings, so I'm like kind of lunching a little bit. But I put in my comments, the collaborative and the consensus group last October held a, well, we didn't hold, actually the Penguins and the Buccini Poland held a meeting about the Lower Hill development, in which they talked about the modification to the land development plan, part of which included the new site for the curtain call. So at that time, we did review the proposed location for the curtain call, and overall, the project in and of itself, the Lower Hill modification, basically received a C+, which was passing from the consensus group standpoint and the collaborative standpoint. Very specifically to the curtain call, which was just one aspect of that review, folks, their main concern was to actually see it happen. And many of the members of the consensus group, as I said before, contributed photos to the project. It has now been, has to be going on, Craig could say for sure, but it has to be going on 12 years since we started this process. There was concern that it actually would not happen. And we actually have pretty grave concerns because many of the members who originally contributed photos are elderly. Some are in their 80s, some are in their 90s, and some have already passed away. So there actually is a sense of somewhat urgency in terms of making sure that this project actually happens. And our general standpoint is not to, that concerns about funding, so on and so forth, do absolutely need to be addressed, but no delay in the approval of the curtain call should happen. That would cause it to be even more likely that some of the people that originally contributed to it will not be here to see its fruition. And I'm not quite sure that it is accurate to say that there will be commentary forthcoming from the consensus group as a result of the meeting that happened in September, because there were very significant technical difficulties and many of our members actually could not hear and could not really contribute to the overall discussion. And we have already, both the consensus group and the collaborative have essentially sent letters to Buccini Poland to say exactly what I've just said here. And so in terms of the consensus group and the collaborative, that's kind of our current official position. Now, something could change, but right now our position is that we reviewed it. Folks in the community said they wanted to see it happen. We want to see it happen, and we don't really want to see any delays in the process. That is my conclusion.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Sorry, I have a screen. Okay, we will now move on to the applicant presentation. So Craig, I will pass this over to you. And you can now share your screen.
It's not working. You cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Oh, sorry about that. There you go.
All right, here we go. All right, can folks see a screen?
We can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for the time this evening and your continued participation and engagement in this project. What I'm going to do is provide a little bit of context. This repeats materials that we shared at St. Benedict the Moor and also the Evening of the Hill bi-monthly plans review and at the DRP a couple of weeks ago. We have a number of our team members who are traveling today and unfortunately won't be able to join us, but I'm joined by Sarita Schreiber from Hood Design in Oakland, and then my development partners from Buccini Poland Group. Dr. Kimberly Ellis is also on to add commentary from their perspective. Let me talk a little bit about sort of who's who and the relationships in realizing this project at this moment. The proposed new location is on land owned by the Urban Redevelopment Authority. PAR, Pittsburgh Arena Real Estate Redevelopment, is the applicant for this project in the process through the Planning Commission as well as with the Urban Redevelopment Authority. We have created a owners association, which we call the Lower Hill District Conservancy, that ultimately owns the various parcels that are being improved in the Lower Hill as open space. The Sports and Exhibition Authority has some funds that have been directed to it for this project. And a stipulation of those funds is that they retain ownership. In order to receive the funds, they retain ownership of the artwork. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Hood Design is the artist. La Quattro Bonsi, Pittsburgh-based firm, is the landscape architect, supported by another a group of local design professionals. Cosmo Technology is the civil engineer. And then we look to be working with Technique Architectural Products, who is a Wilkinsburg-based fabricator who will be doing the metal work and the glass work. We have not bid the site work yet. Ultimately, we'll have a site contractor that we bring on board once we bid the site improvement portion of the project. As Dylan shared, and we'll share again, that this project has a long history. Originally, there was a location identified next to the new arena, PPG Paints Arena. And what we are proposing now is that the artwork, the public artwork, be realized in a location in the Lower Hill. Originally, in about 2009, the Sports and Exhibition Authority and the Penguins engaged a consulting firm, Bressie Einholt, Bethia Brown Consultants, to come up with strategies for public art as part of the new arena development. And there were several components or sites identified within the arena during construction with fences. And then what we're talking about tonight is a outdoor site called Garden Passage that was between the Epiphany Church, a plaza that was being built as part of the new arena on Center Avenue, a narrow landscape section between the church and the arena, ending down at the bottom of the hill near Fifth Avenue at Washington Place. So the sort of idea of a location was identified by the consultant. There was a solicitation for competitive proposals to a select group of artists and a selection committee that ultimately chose Hood Design in April 2009. And their project was called Curtain Call to be realized in this area identified as Garden Passage. Shortly after that, there's outreach and engagement with Terry Baltimore and others associated with the consensus group to identify images. And those images were collected by Hood Design, and they retained those in digital files. We can talk about that in a minute. Meanwhile, the Penguins began focusing their efforts once the arena is built on the redevelopment of the Lower Hill site. We prepare a master plan that and zoning amendments that are adopted in 2014, along with the community collaboration and implementation plan. And the diagram on the left is that master plan from 2014. It shows the areas of open space around the arena. It was then the Console Arena. It shows the location of the CAP project, I-579 project, which ultimately becomes Frankie Pace Park. And there are 3 areas of open space distributed in the blocks that are to be created by new streets. Fast forward to 2023, a number of the streets are built. Frankie Pace Park is built, and we go through a series of discussions that ultimately result in a master plan approval in January of 23, proposing to not build additional streets and to reorganize the open space within the Lower Hill around a set of spaces that align Wiley Avenue, that begin with Frankie Pace, and have a concentrated area in the lower blocks, part of which is now being built with the FNB Tower that's underway, and then a series of open spaces and accessible pathways leading up to Crawford Street. So we reorganize the way the open space is laid out. This is a visualization of the development with a mix of office and residential, the parking garage, and the music venue in the center block, and showing kind of the location of the proposed open space and curtain call up at Crawford and Wiley, and eventually an apartment building next to that. This is an aerial view of existing conditions. Crawford, Wiley, the proposed site is a little more than a half an acre and would be on a portion of the Melody Tent site at Crawford and Wiley. We know that Freedom Corner is right down at Crawford, St. Benedict the Moor Church, Crawford Square Development, Kaylee Roy Orbis Tower, Energy Innovation Center, and the August Wilson House are all within a block of this proposed location. I'm going to attempt to show a recording that we were able to make on earlier this month. Oh, sorry. With Walter's thoughts about hang on a second, about the project in the background. There we go. Bear with me a second here.
It's not Craig. Can you hear me? My voice hopefully is clear.
Folks can hear this?
Craig gave a pretty exhaustive sort of background on the project. I would just add, when we won the competition, this was not an RFP, it was a competition. I think there were 2 other teams that were invited. We came to Pittsburgh and made a presentation at the convention center. The Garden Passage, the prompt for the project was that it was a landscape and an art project. The landscape component of that project was scoped to basically clean storm water from the upper plaza, and the water would have to go through a set of bioswales, and that was part of the landscape component for the original competition. The other piece was an art piece that commemorated in some way the hill district that had been redeveloped on the side. Our scheme we called Curtain Call was inspired by the 10 cycles of August Wilson. And the idea was that we wanted people who had lived in the community to have a curtain call, to come back out and make themselves present. And through that, we offered that we would ask anyone who had lived in the Hill, currently or in the past, to basically come to a series of outdoor cookouts in the Hill and bring photographs. And the idea was we would take those photographs and make curtains. And that gives you Curtain Hall. It was 3 terraces that came down from a stair. Again, the original site was not accessible. It was too steep. There was no ramp condition. There was one accessible site that we made from the bottom. So we allowed there to be complete accessibility from the bottom plaza, but to get to the other 2 gardens, you would literally have to go through a stair. Over time, we literally worked through and got, I think, all the way to 50% CD drawings. We had a cost. We were ready to go to construction, and that's when the funding failed. And that, again, was 2009, 10, 11. Craig mentioned that by 2014, there was a master plan. We thought the project had pretty much died and was not going to be built. Of course, you can imagine it's 15 years now. But we were called by, I think the Penguins called us, was the first call, and asked if the project could actually be moved to the CAP, because the CAP was the first project out of the package. We basically said we would have to start from scratch because our scheme was based on a slope, and everything was based on sloping. So we couldn't take that original design and apply it to the CAP. Again, months passed by that, and then Craig called and said there were some other sites based on the master plan. And we literally took our site and our design, scale versus section, and we looked at the proposed sites that he suggested, and we found that the site at Wiley in Crawford was pretty close to what we were actually doing in the lower part. But we also thought that it was a better site because it sits higher and it actually creates a gateway to the community once you come to the development. And since then, we have worked on the August Wilson House and worked on the green print. So there were other things that we were trying to connect. When we got the site, once we placed it, we were happy to continue because Craig and his team and the Penguins, everyone was optimistic about the funding. So we came back on board and we remade our project for this site. We still have 3 gardens. The gardens are cleaning stormwater, but they're also these giant curtains that we've collected, I think now close to 3,000 images. We have access to the Teenie Harris collection at Carnegie, and we're open to having another call now since we have a new site that we would add more images. Next image. To give you a sense of how this new site works, again, we're at Crawford and Wiley. There is a plaza space there where there is seating and there is a larger extent for gathering where you can actually seat down through all 3 gardens. We decided, since we had an opportunity to have this really steep slope, we decided to have the first curtain be small, the second curtain to be medium, and the last curtain to be large. That way we can actually continue the elevation, but when you're at the top, it really creates a space. Hopefully when the building comes in on the left-hand side, it will actually create a wall condition where you would actually have a contained space. Next. Again, this was some of our collecting. That's Terry Baltimore, who we are hoping can continue working with us to collect some of the images. Here we noted who gave the images, and we counted the images, and we have them all digital. When we have the meetings, we scan the images as well. As I said, we're hoping that we could have another future call for images, and we would come and we would capture those images through whatever the technology needs today, whether it's a scanner or a photograph. Next. And here was the idea. The idea was you would come to the space, and like a quilt, there would just be a kaleidoscope of images. Again, there is no narrative, but this is really about a visual kind of sense. And when you're in the space, you're prompted. There's music that will play. And the music are based on rain songs, R&B songs, like I Can't Stand the Rain, A Rainy Night in Georgia, those kinds of things. So that there's a relationship between the landscape component and the art component. Next. And these are some of the images that we've collected so far. You can see the Teenie Harris archive is primarily black and white. Some residents did give us black and white, but we also have color. And we like the idea that we have both. Now, the 15 years since our initial proposal, the technology for actually printing on glass and how you could actually make a glass wall has changed to our, I guess, our delight, that we're able now to actually print the images directly on the glass and protect them, where before we were printing on plastic and sandwiching them in between. Next. This gives you a sense of that layering. You'll be able to see through the images. So right now you're looking at images that don't have the translucency, but you'll actually be able to see through, and we can work on the opacity, how much you actually see through. So safety issues are not a concern because it's literally like a building wall, a glass wall of a building. Next. And this is the simple kind of construction as I talked about. There's a single panel, a double panel, and a triple panel. And the pieces are not large pieces. They're made up of a triangular, a square, and a rectilinear piece. And that's how we're able to scale the different pieces. We're thinking that at the lower part of the wall, that we have the opportunity to actually have smaller images, or we can make images as large as we want to. And I think that's the beauty of this design, is that we can actually choreograph each curtain. Next. And this kind of gives you a sense. We have the audio. You actually have the way that is being held together through the curtains. And we have these 3 switchbacks that you go through. In each one of the rooms, there's benches to sit, there's planting, there's lighting, and there's audio. Next. So if you think of previous to the art project, this was just a ramp that took you up the hill, which is pretty arduous. I've made this walk multiple times even today. But by having the artwork, we actually find that we have a destination now. And so we actually change the cadence. When you get to the artwork, the movement is much more sinuous. And as you arrive to it, it's faster. So imagine if you're walking up a ramp, it's fast, and then when you get to the artwork, it slows down. Next. And here you can kind of see the access points, the various gathering areas, the pavilion, and the gardens. This will be a garden from the bottom all the way up from Fullerton, all the way up to Crawford. You'll feel like you're in a single space, but the artwork will actually be at the upper. And you should be able to see the artwork from the bottom as you're making your way up. Next. And here's a closer view of those spaces. And you can kind of see in the curve, that's where we place the seating. Next. And then this gives you a sense, like cutting through down the street, you can kind of see how steep the site is. The upper part is less steep. The bottom part is real steep. So we're able to actually create a comfortable set of slopes when you're at the curtain itself. And here you can kind of see curtain area B, people standing there, the height of the wall, 12 to 18 feet, the rain garden, there are theatrical lights. So it will have a presence. Again, it will not be dark. It will almost be like there's a building lining the edge of the street. Next. And this gives you a sense of the storm water, what we're able to capture, again, off of the upper part of Wiley into the plaza. The blue shows you where we're actually collecting and cleaning the water. So that component is still in flux. Thanks. And here an aerial view looking, again, you don't see a building to the right, but you can imagine once the building goes up, it begins to frame that edge. And as you're walking down the street, you can actually come into each room at the center of each circle. So you actually come in, break through each one of the facades of glass. Next. And then these are just some views. If you're walking along the edge, not wanting to go to each one, they actually create a foil to the street. Next. And then we see it at nighttime lit up, again, providing a really powerful, dramatic, landscape. Next. And then when you get close up, again, having the ability to sit and look at the kaleidoscope of images of people who have lived and are living in the Hill District. Thanks. Questions and comments? Thank you very much.
So again, that was a recording of images and slides that we prepared.
Hey, thank you very much. That was expensive.
That Walter provided to the Hill District Planning Committee. Let me see if I can get closed out of that. And back to screen images. There we go. A couple of weeks ago, happy to dig deeper into the artwork with Sarita's perspective from Hood Design, answer any other questions about the site plan and proposed work. A little bit of chronology to build on. As Walter highlighted, in about 2019, he was approached by the SEA, and the work in planning and design for the Frankie Pace Park project was underway. And was there a potential for placing the artwork in that project? It then has its own public art program that we know the outcome of is some wonderful pieces by local artists. We followed up in the fall of 2019, reaching out to Walter to see if there was, as he outlined, any interest in evaluating a potential location for curtain call in the Lower Hill Development open spaces. It was pretty apparent by then that, almost 10 years had elapsed, and we really were collectively, the SEA, the Penguins, the philanthropic and public community, were struggling to get to a place where this project was fully funded and ready to go. So we we talked with Walter about re-envisioning it in the new location. COVID hit us. We put pencils down for a couple of years. We restarted in 22. By the spring of 23, we had a pretty good idea about the plan, the re-envisioning of the art itself, and a strategy of funding. So we submitted in March the final land development plan package to the city. We shared that with the RCOs, including Uptown Partners in the Hill. And then we've submitted a development review panel application in April. And then in May at the URA and SEA board meetings, we're asked to hold on advancing the FLDP through planning until a community meeting was convened to address the location proposal. We did that in August. And we also, as Dylan mentioned, had gone through a DRP presentation a couple of weeks ago. And we're now back, looking to see if it's appropriate to advance this through Planning Commission and ultimately the authorities for approval. Our goal would be to get to a place where by the end of the year, we had Planning Commission approval that unlocks a couple of the grants that we've secured as major public approvals and be able to commit to Hood the fabrication component of the project. By springtime, we'd like to have bid the work and be able to award site improvement contracts so that it can be constructed in the season next year, spring, summer, and the artwork being fabricated and be installed by fall. That's our goal right now. We understand there's lots of input perspectives about this. The DRP letter came this afternoon. We haven't fully reviewed it in great detail. And there's some number of questions that we're asked to respond and a timeline for response. So we just received that this afternoon. One of the other questions that has come up is this notion of ownership. Under our zoning for the site, there's an obligation to create at least 10% of the land as public urban open space. That would apply on an individual parcel basis. So each development would have to set aside some space, a plaza or something within its property. We approached the idea of open space and got the zoning modified to allow us to aggregate it, and that lets us build larger concentrated areas. When we were having that discussion way back in 2012, 13, and 14, there were several different avenues that it could take. It could be improved, turned over to the city to become public park. It could be improved and retained by the authorities, much like the open space at Southside Riverfront Park and the North Shore, with maintenance contributions from the adjacent property owners, or, and this is what we ultimately proposed, setting up an owners association where the adjacent property owners, through an annual budget and an assessment program, assessment structure, would make contributions to the maintenance and operation of that open space. The city wasn't interested in taking the improved areas as city park. The authorities were not interested in retaining ownership of them. And the ultimate direction that we've set forth on is this owners association, which we call the Lower Hill District Conservancy. That was formed in 2021, right at the time that the FNB Tower project started. There's a portion of open space that's being completed by that project. And then in 24, when it's completed, the Conservancy, the association, will have its first responsibility to receive improved areas and to maintain them. So there really hasn't been anything that the Conservancy or association has done up to this point, and we're getting ready, putting budgets together to receive the improved open space and begin to operate it and maintain it. So I added on to some chronology, some clarification on ownership. And Sarita, if you have any points that maybe Walter didn't touch on that go to the artwork.
Yeah, I
go-
just want to jump in, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but I did get a chance to do a cursory review of the letter that was just shared with me. And I think it's useful to just point out that while the structural framework of the artwork is completely designed, is ready to be permitted, to be fabricated, the actual curation and graphic content of the panels to accurately tell the story of the Hill District and to reflect residents and their contributions that work has yet to begin in full. So the community collection, as Craig and Walter touched on, we've collected more than 600 images, which is an incredible amount. And Walter mentioned we want to collect even more, but I think there is a desire and an appetite too to bring the community into the curation and narrative process to say, how can we tell the story through how we lay out the images. As you can see, they're kind of quilted on the page. I think the artist will provide that type of template, and then we will figure out a process to bring the community in to really tell that story in a way that one relies on images, but might also bring in interpretive signage or some type of textual information, be that on, the fascia that we see below the panels or in another location. So I just want to acknowledge that that is not per se a gap. It's just a process that we've been dealing with in parallel. And Craig, please correct me if I'm wrong or add if
No,
you have
thank
anything
you.
else to say.
Thank you. We certainly have an obligation to recognize funders and supporters in a traditional plaque, but how we go about this broader element of narration and storytelling, what's fixed, what could be digital, there's a lot of tools and avenues that can play out and is yet to be explored, really. So, questions, discussion.
Can I ask Dr. Lang a couple of questions? Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Kimberly Ellis with the Buccini Polling Group, who's also a historical resident. So Dr. Lang, I'm wearing my Hill resident hat now.
Young, please.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Dr. Young. Sorry. If you recall, can you recall what memories you had about our push for Curtain Call to be along PPG Paints Arena, and then what changed residents' mind about that location?
Oh, the main thing that changed, well, there were concerns that if you look at the culture of Penguins fans and the demographics of Penguins fans and the demographics of people that live in the Hill District, there was a really great sense that the mixing of those two could cause a lot of clashes on just plain old black, white, kind of stuff, right? So there were concerns about that, but folks were willing to actually overlook that. But what happened was the Penguins put the Mario Lemieux statue where the Curtain Call was supposed to be, and so it became a moot point. And at that point, people were just kind of like furious, but at the same time was like, fine, just as long as it goes somewhere in the lower hill. That was the main part of the discussion at that time, as I recall.
Okay. Right. Now I recall the same. I recall a lot of discussion, and this discussion occurred within the Hill District, correct?
Yeah. The consensus group had lots of meetings. And it was part leading up to the developing the CBA. This was a discussion that was had during the CBA process, which involved roughly 100 organizations in the Hill and across the city that were really concerned about making sure that there was community benefit for the development going on in Grove Hill. While I have the mic for a second, one of the people depicted in one of the pictures that was shown was Mr. Battle, who is no longer here with us, which is an example of the people who are slowly but surely passing away, while continued debate goes on about exactly whether or not or where or whenever to locate this project. And again, I would just continue to emphasize that folks on our end, like Miss Edna, like Miss Coy, like other folks in the neighborhood are just like, can I just see the project happen before I die? I mean, that's real talk. I'm sorry, please.
How old is Miss Edna?
Miss Edna's gotta be what, 90? She probably beat me up for even saying 95,
Mm-hmm.
something like
No,
that.
yeah, no, I just wanted to ask to emphasize the point. So would you say, as a Hill resident and or on behalf of the Hill Consensus Group, that the move from the side of PG Arena to being front and center at Wiley and Crawford is clearly a better location?
Well, I'm no longer a Hill resident, so I can't really speak in that regard, but I can say that folks in the follow-up discussions, that there was some communication of like, fine, we want to be over there with them anyway, kind of sort of stuff. And I hate to say it like that, but that's real talk in terms of just culturally, folks felt like that was a weird potential mix anyway. And so the new location could offer more continuity of culture. And I think things have probably changed pretty significantly since that time in terms of how people relate to each other. Maybe things have gotten slightly better, but it was definitely kind of not preferred at the time when this all came to be conceptualized and codified.
Right. Okay. And last two questions. Is the Hill Consensus Group a member of the DRP?
We are no longer.
Okay. So the Hill Consensus Group has left the DRP.
Yes.
Okay. And is Hill Collaborative Voices a member of the DRP?
No.
Okay. And so would you define the DRP as the unified voice of the community on development?
I think that there's debate within the neighborhood about whether or not that's the case.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks for
we do have additional questions. So I do want to recognize other hands that are raised as well. And we do have questions in our Q&A tool that we do have to get to as well.
Okay. I'll say, yeah. So I'm wrapping up. This is a part of my presentation. So I have a question. I have a couple of questions for Dylan. Dylan, are you new to the Hill CDC? How long have you been there?
Hi, Dr. Ellis. Yeah, I would say I'm relatively new to the Hill CDC. I started my engagement with them through the Coro Center for Public Affairs, and they have now hired me full time.
Okay, so how long have you been there?
Oh, it's probably totaled over 6 months now.
Okay. And do you know how many organizations were added to the DRP within the last 2 years?
Within the last 2 years, I don't know if there's been much of a change, but I do think it's important to note, Dr. Ellis, that the collaborative was invited to participate in the development review panel process and be a member organization. They never responded or either denied that permission that we gave them. And as Dr. Young mentioned, the Consensus Group is no longer a member of the DRP, but they have been a member of the DRP for the entire existence up until a few months ago. And the creation of the DRP came out of negotiations with the Hill District Consensus Group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for that. And then the script that you read, that's literally a script. Those were not your words, right? Were you
I'm not sure what you mean.
the slides you were reading, you didn't write those slides, right?
The slides about the developer's engagement with the DRP were written by me, yes. And we have a general template like the rest of the other RCOs who participate in the jam. They all have very similar slide decks that really don't change all that much, but we make sure at Hill CDC to update our slide decks before every meeting to include the engagement that the developer has had with our team.
Okay, so you'll take responsibility for the errors that are in the slides? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not familiar with the errors you're speaking about.
Yeah, I mean, one being the unified voice of the development in the Hill District. There are reasons why the Hill
Is
Consensus
that
Group.
your opinion though, Dr. Ellis, that you're talking
No,
about? Like,
no, in fact, that's why I asked Dr. Young. I asked her facts. So
okay.
that's just so that we're clear. And you said you've only been here for 6 months, so respectfully, you don't actually know the history, and I'll move on from you. I just wanted to know, how long you'd been there and what exactly you were reading. But for the rest of the community, I think Craig addressed many of the different issues that have been explained. And I think it's really important to note that there has been community input, one in the dissatisfaction of the location that the community first voted on. The community initially said we wanted it next to PPG Arena, and the community then said we don't want it next to the PPG Arena, but it should be in the Lower Hill. So the only gap in communication has to do with the years that have gone by, the politics and so on and so forth, and where the new location would actually be. And then finally, speaking to where the location actually is, it is not an isolated location, just for everybody to be clear. It is well within the Lower Hill CSIP Artistic and Cultural Legacy Program, literally right down the street from the August Wilson House, literally a couple of blocks away from Freedom Corner. It is another block away, a block and a half, I guess, from what will be the EMS facility with its distinct and historical name, as well as Live Nation with the capturing of its cultural legacy and the jazz greats, and then running down Wiley Avenue right into Frankie Pace Park, as well as the art that's going to be in the open space. So all of that to say, Curtain Call is not isolated at all, and it's well within both a residential and business community. Thanks so much for listening.
Dylan, I know your hand was up.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to add some comments and clarity as well regarding the community event that we held with the Penguins at the St. Benedict the More Parish that I attended. We did have technical difficulties, but the technical support fell to the Penguins. So we asked the Penguins to come to our bi-monthly planning meeting to give a clear presentation that was uninterrupted by technical problems. So that's the first fact. The second is that a lot of people did have feedback about the move at this meeting that we held at the St. Benedict the More. People were skeptical or questioning why it had to move. And a lot of people expressed concerns around the location due to its surrounding of residential units. As Craig mentioned in his presentation, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to use this as an educational point and a tourist destination. I think that it wasn't Craig that said that, it was Walter Hood. He wants to create this as a destination. And I think a lot of the community members in attendance at that meeting shared that goal. And they wanted to see a location that reflected that. At the top of the Wiley Avenue was something that a lot of people in attendance, and I'll be honest, there were people that were supportive of the move, and it seems that the community's position on this is not clear, and that was why one of the next steps that we established was to potentially explore a community survey to gather feedback and a wide opinion on this move. But as I was going to say, the fact that it is surrounded by residential units was a concern, as the fact that a destination that people would travel to see might not necessarily include a residential community. And if it was originally at the site that was originally selected, there would be people from around the world who go to experience things at PPG Arena that would be exposed to this installation. And as I said, it might be something that is potentially contentious, but as Dr. Young mentioned, but I think that a lot of people in the community see the history of the Lower Hill and the need to educate people on what happened, to show people who are coming to this PPG Arena from wherever that there used to be something totally different here, and that PPG Arena came from a different location. Like the entire location of PPG Arena came about because of the demolition of Millen Arena. And so that history is important to recognize in the curtain call. And so I think that there are still next steps to be made. And like was mentioned, the technical difficulties did make it complicated at the St. Benedict the Moor Parish meeting. So that is why the three conveners of the meeting, which was the consensus group, the Shenley Heights Collaborative, and the Hill CDC, the three RCOs which convened the meeting, agreed to meet this week to establish an outline of our memo that will be drafted in due time to share with the Penguins and the wider community for further discussion. I think that's everything that I have to add, but if I think of other things, I will be sure to include them.
Yeah,
Um,
briefly, I certainly, that event at Ammon, I mean, not at Ammon, but St. Benedict or then Moore was a professional low point in community presentations. It was awful. And I'm grateful that we had an audience and an opportunity to go through the presentation again, shortly thereafter and make that available. I think that the content that we provided, that we recorded collectively, was consistent with what we talked about. But yeah, that was a disaster. That was a professional low. But thank you for the opportunity to present it several weeks later and to capture that recording. It's really wonderful to be able to share that.
Gotcha. So Marimba has she had her hand raised, and so just gonna allow her the opportunity to talk. Marimba, are you there? Are you there? Hello? Hello? All right. Promoting her to panelist. She can talk.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, it's Marimba. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why I wasn't able to join just now, Ose, but I think Dylan handled everything. I don't think there are any additional questions that I can do to answer. He did a thorough job answering and responding to any questions or concerns. So I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna hand it over to Carol.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to say nothing either. But now that I am saying something, I really do think, it's since years have been gone by, and in particular Miss Terry Baltimore and Miss Etna and Mrs. Coy that really worked hard on the project. I think really and truly without making it drag on, in respects to them, I think the project, should move forward. It's the issue of who's going to pay for it, really. That's the real bottom line. Who's going to pay for the project? So that's what I wanted to say. And sorry I put my hands up because I didn't realize I did.
Okay. No worries. All right, so, oh, Dr. Young, I'm so sorry. Didn't realize I had skipped over you.
Oh, no, well, Carol just spoke, but I think that I'm not sure of Dylan's characterization of what that future meeting is, at least on behalf of the consensus group, is correct. I was not, and Carol can correct me if I'm misunderstanding that. The idea that we were going to put forward a collective memo about the project is not my understanding, but Carol may, since she is the person that's going to attend that meeting, may be able to correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I was going to say.
I can speak to that a little bit. This is Marimba, and hopefully Carol can jump back on as well. That is what was agreed to when the three RCO groups came together: the Hill District Consensus Group, the Shenley Heights Collaborative, and the Hill CDC agreed to host the joint meeting after several, interactions with one another, as well as the PINs. And at the meeting, and especially because there were technical issues, the groups and the attendees thought it would be prudent to provide a written document to outline and summarize concerns as a go-forward plan and strategy. And that was discussed at the meeting.
Again, I'm not sure if that's the consensus group planning to make an official statement in alignment with the CRC and the Shenley Heights Collaborative.
Yeah, we weren't making a statement, again, for the people who attended. The agreement was to come
I understand
together.
you're saying that after the meeting.
Right, the agreement for the people
I'm
who
saying
attended.
that I'm not sure that that's not the understanding I have of what's supposed to be the product of that meeting. But Carol.
Well,
And Carol, you have permission to talk. You don't have to raise your hand.
You're muted, Carol.
Yeah, I agree to attend the meeting this week, mainly because I couldn't really hear. And it's just to like catch up more or less. Now, I already talked to Miss Etna and Miss Coy. They are very, very, very disappointed. And, I can't say it enough. I really think the project moving on, it doesn't need to go into overkill. So I'm coming to the meeting to learn not necessarily what next steps and all that next steps, but all that doing everything with the community. I think there is an opportunity for more people, which Terry already said she wouldn't mind doing, would take more art or people's memories. I think there's opportunities for that. but I'm not going to attend the meeting so we can just go into overkill. And I told Miss Edna and Mrs. Coy that I would attend the meeting to find out what's the next steps, because we really could not hear. But not to drag it out. And truthfully, I'm gonna just put it out there. I really don't think, even though we're a RCO and Shirley Heights and different ones are RCOs, I really don't think the project is fair to the ones that work on the project. And there was even at the meeting that people, that's nice that people came to hear about the project, but they didn't really put in the time, you know, and so I'm just putting it out there. I'm speaking for Miss Edna and Miss Coy as best as I can, because Barney said, like, they're up in age and they really want to see this project done and get their accolades for the project. Miss Edna, Miss Terry Baltimore, and Miss Coy.
And they're welcome to come as well, Carol, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I wanted to bring them, but you know,
Mhm.
there's some challenges, but for
Mhm.
real, Marimba, they're meeting out. You
I
know,
understand.
this
I
meeting
understand that.
stuff for a lot of people, sometimes, you know, it's just over, it's overkill.
Right.
You
Got it. I
know,
got it. I got it.
yes, overkill. So I don't
Mhm.
know. I'll try my best if they want to get on Zoom, if they don't, but you know, I'm gonna come and just, you know, try to catch up.
Sure. No worries. We'll see you at the meeting. And the issues that Dylan outlined, very succinctly were the ones that came up at the community meeting. So that's what we'll be discussing for whoever may decide to attend. Thank you.
A quick question. How many community members actually attended the Sunday meeting at St. Benedict the Moor Church? I saw about 15 persons. Is that roughly correct?
Are you talking, Dr. Ellis, in person? Did you see 15 or online? Because we had about 15 or 20 online. And like Craig outlined, we had technical difficulties, so some people just gave up and left. But we did have about 30 or so people in person at the parish.
Yeah, I was speaking about in person.
Okay. Well, it was definitely more than 15.
It was probably about 25, close to 30.
Okay.
Okay,
And I didn't know, Marimba, this meeting that's coming up, I thought it was just the RCO, so it's open to the community.
It's for the RCOs and the people who who participated in the conversation to follow up in writing as we promised. So, we let the RCOs know it's hard to write by committee, but we have no concerns about, people who want to participate coming. We just need to know because we didn't reserve a larger room. But yeah, our goal is not to, like you said, have a bunch of new meetings. We've had several meetings and several touch points to make sure we could ascertain the information necessary to provide a succinct written memo. So, but yeah, let us know. Just work with Dylan and let us know if there are other
It'll
folks.
be online. It'll be on Zoom.
No, it's not. It'll be in person.
See, Miss Edna and Miss Coy won't be able to come.
Okay. We'll follow up with you offline.
And we'll do the same, Carol and Dr. Young. Thank you for that, because I saw that especially Miss Edna Council, who you said is 91.
93.
Oh, sorry, 93. Thanks for the correction in the chat. If you missed Dr. Young's comment in the chat, please do read the chat. Yeah, so she was able to come to one of our meetings, and I was surprised to see her there. And she literally said, I've been coming to these meetings since the 70s. And that it blew my mind. So I was grateful to have her there, grateful to be able to ask her a few questions, and we can definitely follow up with her by phone and whatnot. And we do want people who have been involved and have done the work to be a part of this project as well. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe it could be a Zoom link for them, you know, and maybe somebody can, and their family can help them get on.
So we do have one question in the chat from Tylita Wubro. And pardon me if I am saying your name incorrectly. So good evening. My name is Tylita Wubro, and I am here for a few reasons. I am the PR for Omega Grand chapter at the Hiram Grand Lodge located at 2155 Center Avenue. And we would like to receive emails and communications in regards to current and upcoming developments and hopefully be a part of those discussions. Can I be added to an email listing? The second portion of the question is not really relevant, more so relevant probably to the RCOs. Additionally, she says that she has some old black and white, or they have old black and white Hill District photos they would like to contribute to the project. So that's more so for
Terry.
Okay. But that's all. Just wanting to incorporate it into email listings and okay. And Dr. Ellis has provided the Lower Hill redevelopment website for you, and I will put that in the answer.
So, you know, I'll look to speak with many of you to try to better understand next steps. I think I want to remind the sort of sense of where Curtain Call was back in 2018, 2019. Lots of effort was underway to realize the Frankie Pace Park CAP project, which includes a very significant public art component. This project was not getting traction in its original location with the multiple sponsors. We saw an opportunity on behalf of the Lower Hill Development to see if there was a way to realize it, leveraging the investment that's being made as part of open space and other factors that are involved there. I'm not so sure that a rejection of this location automatically realizes it in the original location. We have funding that's specific to this. We have efforts underway. There's momentum to build and to develop and improve this open space area. And I think that an artist, I can't speak for Walter, but his practice has progressed and evolved over the years. He would have to reconsider the location. We also pointed out that it wasn't fully accessible, so the artwork was compromised and areas of it that weren't being created were not fully accessible. The plaza exists, the Lemieux statue exists. It didn't preclude Curtain Call being realized. It could still happen, but I'm not so sure that I, sitting here today, have a clear idea about how it would be realized and what the budget would be in 2023 for doing that project. So I think that, you know, I'm responding to people saying, we'd like to see this happen, and trying to capture that spirit in realizing that we can deliberate and have lots of discussions about how and what it should consider, elements like narrative that Sarita talked about and curation of images. But I'm not so sure that I have, on behalf of PAR, an idea about how it would be realized if not this location. So happy to
We
continue.
believe in you guys, Craig. We know you work miracles. Not to suggest that this location would not be the ultimate selection, but I'm sure you can understand that Curtain Call can't be realized somewhere else is maybe, you know, maybe a bit of a reach. given the volume of capital that's being spent on the Lower Hill.
Right.
But point taken.
Yep. So happy to continue to engage and sort this out and get to a place of, collective comfort. Let us know what's next.
Well, if there are no additional questions at this time, I would say that this development activities meeting has concluded. The recording will be made available to your registered community organizations. Your report will be made available on the Development Activities Meetings website. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.